Tension for the long-time boundary wahala between Edo and Delta State rise again, wey don make Edo State Deputy Governor Right Honorable Idahosa make a strong appeal to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to immediately freeze the accounts of Delta-based oil companies wey dey make profit from crude oil drilling for disputed oil wells wey Edo State believe say e belong to them. Oga Idahosa tok dis one for one meeting with the National and State Boundary Commission Committee for Conference Hall, Government House, Benin City. As chairman of the Edo State Boundary Committee, he insists say freezing those accounts go show transparency and fairness as dem dey work to settle the matter. According to am, im dey appeal to President Tinubu to order all the regulatory agencies wey oversee these oil companies to stop every benefit wey dem dey send go Delta State until the dispute clear finish. He accused Delta State and even the National Boundary Commission of delaying the process, say the facts dey show clearly say the disputed oil assets belong to Edo State. He come also beg the Director General of the National Boundary Commission to use im office well, follow the documents the Commission already get, and make sure say their fact-finding visit to the two states reveal the true ownership of the oil wells. He mention say many communities, especially Orogbo and Uronigbe, don suffer sake of this long-time issue.
Your visit is very timely and significant, as it comes at a critical moment where boundary-related matters within and around Edo State continues to pose complex challenges to peaceful coexistence, interstate relations, and socio-economic development of our border communities and the state as a whole. While we appreciate your continued effort of the Commission in addressing boundary issues across the country, we would like to draw your attention to a specific area of concern that requires urgent attention and decisive action. The number one is the non-completion of the Edo-Kogi interstate boundary monumentation. Despite several joint meetings, conclusion of all preliminary field work, and the final award of contracts for the monumentation boundary and of Edo and Kogi interstate boundary, the boundary between two states still remain largely undecided. In spite of having commenced since 2007, but was unfortunately abandoned by the surveyor firm charged with the responsibility of carrying out a monumentation due to attack on the surveyors. This has led to uncertainty, tension, and disputes among communities along the Edo-Kogi interstate boundary corridor. We urge the Commission to urgently mobilize the contractor back to site to complete the monumentation process so that they can bring this situation with a long-lasting solution. Number two is the delay in the resolution of Edo-Delta interstate boundary. The unresolved boundary dispute between Edo and Delta State has lingered too long, and the delay in action by both Commission and Delta State has continued to generate friction among communities situated along the boundaries. Let me take it again. The delay in the resolution of Edo-Delta interstate boundary. The unresolved boundary dispute between Edo and Delta has lingered for too long, and the delay in action by both Commission and Delta State has continued to generate friction among communities situated along the boundary. Recently, the Interstate Technical Meeting on the boundary scheduled to hold on the 12th to 14th of August 2025 by the National Boundary Commission could not hold because of non-readiness on the part of Delta State. This repeated postponement of meetings due to non-readiness of Delta State, in our view, is a deliberate attempt to frustrate the resolution process, thereby enabling continuous encroachment under the excuse that the matter remained pending before the Commission. Edo State consider this attitude unacceptable. Similarly, the excuse by the National Boundary Commission that some of the legal notices defining these boundaries are ambiguous. It is unacceptable to Edo State as a map, such as Nigeria map, Benin provision map, Delta provision map, and Edo State map were hitherto drawn using legal notices. We therefore appeal for a renewed commitment and a clear timeline towards a conclusive demarcation of this boundary in a spirit of justice and peaceful coexistence. The third one is attempt by the platform oil company to drill oil well in Uronigwe community in Edo State. Edo State has received credible intelligence and verifiable reports that platform oil company, in collaboration with the officials of Delta State, have begun moves to drill oil wells in Uronigwe, a community that is clearly situated within Edo State. These acts amount to a brazen encroachment and affront to our territorial sovereignty. Let it be placed on record that Edo State will not, under any guise, permit 1 inch of our land to be ceded for exploration by any other state. It is important to state here that the legal notice number 185 of the 1926 defines the boundary between Edo and Delta State as a river Ethiop. This river is clearly visible on ground, and it does not require any scientific interpretation in tracing this natural boundary. The fourth one is the unlawful attribution of revenue from Seplat oil wells in Urugu community to Delta State. Furthermore, the Director General, I wish to express our deep concern over the unlawful attribution of revenue accruing from Seplat oil wells located in Urugu community, Orion local government area of Edo State to Delta State. This misrepresentation perpetuated by certain agents of the federal government in collaboration with the officials of Delta State constitute an economic injustice against Edo State. We will call on the National Boundary Commission to urgently intervene and ensure that this error is corrected and the revenue from these oil wells are ascribed to Edo State. My esteemed Director General, these concerns are not merely administrative. They impact the daily lives, security, and the future of our citizens. We therefore solicit your prompt intervention and leadership in ensuring that these issues are treated with utmost urgency and fairness they deserve. Let me reaffirm that the government of Edo State, under the leadership of His Excellency, the Executive Governor of our dear state, Distinguished Senator Monday Okpebholo, remain fully committed to a peaceful dialogue, cooperation, and lawful resolution of all boundary-related issues affecting the state. We are ready to support the Commission's work in any way necessary to ensure lasting peace and clarity along all interstate boundary matters. Edo State has been peaceful to ensure that this thing is resolved amicably. But I want to use this opportunity to appeal to the Mr. President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to stop or instruct the agencies involved that regulate all the activities of this exploration company to stop paying any of those benefits to Delta State, pending when this matter is resolved. Because it is clear that Delta State, they are playing games with us and also playing games with the National Boundary Commission, because they don't want this matter to be resolved, knowing fully well that those assets belong to Edo State. So I'm also begging the DG to use your office in line with the earlier speakers, that you have documents. You can do your private investigation. And as we are speaking, as we are here, your commission, and based on the documents available to you, you know who owns this area. But you are being diplomatic. In this situation, sir, we want to appeal to you to use your veto power to resolve this issue. The other bordering communities or interstate boundary related issues, we don't have, pressing pressure as regards to Edo and Kogi, Edo and Ondo, but that of Delta and Edo State. Because we have been patient enough, communities are involved, our citizens are suffering from things that they were supposed to be benefiting from. God has given them all these opportunities for them to develop their communities and their state. But instead, the National Boundary Commission is allowing these opportunities to go to Delta State. Mr. DG, sir, we want to use this opportunity to tell you, as a state, that we will no longer tolerate it. And this issue must be resolved, and you must give us a specific timeline to resolve this issue. Known to us that the two parties agreed to submit their documents. I believe Delta said at the end of July. And now this is, I believe, the second week of November. And it is clear, since then, Edo State have submitted those documents to them, clearly that we are confident that we own those, the area that is in dispute. And since then, from July to November, Delta State are still unable to submit those documents. And that is why I requested that there should be a timeline. Because this thing could last for a couple of years if not properly monitored. So I want you to give us, I know there's a budgetary provision issue across the country, but you are an agency and you should be able to give us a timeline, because as we speak, there is so much tension and pressure in those communities affected. And if the state government cannot give them something substantive to work with, it might lead to internal crisis or communal crisis. We don't want that. That is why we want this issue resolved as soon as possible.
The Director General of the National Boundary Commission, Surveyor Adamu Adaji, Contact says since the commission don't finish receiving documents and submissions, communication channels don't finish already. Iyan said the commission must now move to the next statutory stage and no party go dey allowed to slow down the process. He insists that the matter must end once and for all based on the documents where they are available.
Your Excellency, I'm in Edo State with my team to interface with the State Boundary Committee on the best way forward to address some of the issues you have raised. Principally, you have talked about the inconclusive demarcation exercise on the Edo-Kogi interstate boundary. And more importantly, you have expressed the worry and concern of the state on the boundary between Edo and Delta State, the boundary between two brothers. Your Excellency, as you are aware, your state shares common interstate boundaries with Anambra State, Ondo State, Kogi State, and of course your brothers in Delta State. And I'm happy to say that the Commission has intervened in all these boundaries, and they are at various stages of the boundary definition processes. The one of interest to the state mainly, which is the boundary between Edo and her sister state of Delta, is what perhaps I would throw more light on. That between Edo and Kogi state has been defined, and as Your Excellency rightly pointed out, at some point it was even awarded for the emplacement of markers to define the boundary so that people along the boundary corridor can, without much problem, ascertain where the boundary line is. But unfortunately, the exercise was inconclusive because there was some resistance by some border communities, and since then, we've not been able to make headway. But we agree that the work will commence soon, except that it will require some budgetary provision, which we are struggling to get, so that we can at least resume work. And before we do that, we'll bring the two states together to give us assurances that they will cooperate and support and enlighten their people properly, so that the boundary that has been agreed upon and approved will be put on ground for ease of recognition by the border communities of both states. It's a boundary that was decided during the colonial era, the boundary between the northern region and the southern region, following the sector, is defined by Legal Notice 126 of 1954. The boundary has been decided. So it remains just tracing. And we took time to trace the boundary. After so many hitches, we were able to trace the boundary, discussed, and the boundary line was approved for emplacement on ground for people along the boundary corridor to be able to ascertain and recognize the boundary with ease. Unfortunately, that work was not concluded, and we'll try and see how we'll get the necessary funds to make sure that demarcation exercise is commenced and completed as quickly as possible. Your Excellency, the boundary between Delta and Edo State, as you know, is a boundary that was created, that came into being in 1991 when the two states that were together in the old Bender State were separated as Edo and Delta states. And the boundary follows what used to be the interprovincial boundary between Benin province and Warri province, except for some minor, some little adjustment, because we're told that a division was moved from Benin to join Warri province, the Asaba division. Then at some point, records show that a part of Warri province was also moved to Benin province. And that created some new boundary, which had been the cause of agitation and contest by the two parties. Because when Jesse Native Authority was moved from Warri to Benin province, Jesse. So it created a kind of relation to the interprovincial boundary, and that altered the boundary line, which is what we have been trying to ascertain, with some resistance here and there. But thank God, the two states are brothers, they were able to cooperate and we were able to resolve that. Your Excellency, we have complained that some of the legal notices that defined the provinces were not quite clear in some instances. Some features that were mentioned could not be found on ground. Some communities were mentioned could not also be found. And that had delayed the process of the definition of boundary. Now, the boundary was segmented into about 11 sectors. When we have the meeting on that. A team of officials of the National Boundary Commission, Edo State, and Delta State had met severally to try to see how we could navigate around some of these documents that were a little bit quite ambiguous in terms of clarity. And in the process, we segmented the boundary into 11 sectors. And I'm happy to say that with the persistent meeting of the states and the Boundary Commission, they were able to agree substantially on the alignment of the boundary in sectors 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The sector 2, which is still a little bit disputed by the two states, is a sector where Your Excellency rightly pointed out that the legal notice 185 of 1926 is relevant. And that is where we have the Ogyopa Forest Reserve. The last meeting held by the technical committee agreed that legal notice 185 of 1926 is key and relevant. And also agreed that the complaint of Delta State be accommodated and Delta State be allowed time to produce documents that may throw more light on the issues of contributions made for the formation of the Ogyopa Forest Reserve, which seems to be the issue. It was said about 6 communities contributed to the formation of the Ogyopa Forest Reserve. Of these 6 communities that contributed originally, 4 are presently in Delta State, while 2 are in Edo State. But the plotting of the forest reserve is putting the forest reserve on the side of Edo State. And that is why Delta is of the view that some of our communities also contributed to the forest reserve. And we've said the state be granted time up to 15th July this year to produce additional documents that can throw more light. Unfortunately, we are yet to receive such documents. One other area of contention by 2 states is the sector where the boundary was described to follow Ethiopia River. The agreement by the technical committee is that the 2 states should submit documents to justify their claims, while Delta will submit documents to justify her claim to why the river is not the boundary in that sector. Edo State was asked to also produce documents that will substantiate and mainly perhaps explain the extent of the river that forms the boundary. It may not be the entirety of Ethiopia River, starting from its source to its end, that may be the boundary, but certain portion of the river, as agreed, forms part of the boundary. So we want to know at what point is Ethiopia River the boundary, and at what point is the boundary going off the Ethiopia River, for us to know the sector, since it is not the entirety of the river. So I think that is what Edo State will assist by getting us clarity. I think Ethiopia River was made the boundary in that sector because of the transfer of native authority from Warri province then to Benin province. In 1926, defined by legal notice 185 of 1926. So we want to know the extent of the river that constitutes the boundary. Apart from that, the few gray areas along other sectors are where a position of the community known as Brokodo that was advanced by Delta State was asked to be properly explained and have the position identified for us to be able to make a meaning of the boundary alignment as provided in the documents that define the boundary in that sector. The field team said when they went on ground, they could not find the community. But since the community is key, whether there are documents that can really explain and throw more light as to its position for surveyors to capture and identify it on ground. So, Your Excellency, these are some of the issues. Your Excellency raised the issue of the activity of platform, the trading of oil in a sector that should be Edo, but perhaps credited to the other states. That we may not know of, but what we know is once the boundary is clearly defined, any activity on the side of Edo will be in Edo State. Any activity on the side of Delta will be in Delta State. But I want to assure Your Excellency that with the renewed interest by your administration in this exercise, we're encouraged and we'll give you all the necessary support and we'll do our best and prioritize this boundary and make sure that it is defined as quickly as possible. Like I said to His Excellency, the Governor, sometimes some of the issues on these boundaries that may not be quite clear and cannot be based on technicality, the idea of political solution is coming where the executives, they put us together and give executive fear or understanding of the boundary. Because I want to believe with the proactiveness of the administration, you will no doubt reach out to your sister state where such issues need to be clarified and where executive wisdom has to be brought in for a solution. Because some of the documents we use are documents that were defining either Benin province or Warri province that were depicted to us as independence. Some of the boundaries, some of the documents are documents that had been 1926, 1937. These are documents that were done many years ago with not very precise description. And they are subject to a lot of errors if we want to use the modern day technology. So where such things occur, we will plead for the intervention of the executive so that it can be resolved amicably. Suggestions, recommendations will be made, but the final listing will be the understanding of the people. Now, some of the issues that people along border areas are worried about is if a boundary line is such that it calls a community into the wrong side, what's going to be the fate of the people? Well, we are Nigerians, people can live anywhere. And where it becomes necessary for such people to be relocated, I want to plead that the governments of the two states will collaborate and ensure that the people affected are not allowed to suffer what is not really they are making. So, Your Excellency, I want to thank you very much, and through you thank the Edo State government and the people for the cooperation we've received so far, and the cooperation that is promised as we make progress. But I want to assure you, Edo State will be given priority attention. The case of Delta Edo, Edo Kogi, when we had to appear before the House of Reps, and the issue was discussed. We talked about non-availability of funds to continue. The House committee promised to even see what they can do to make sure that funds are provided for us to ensure that the boundary is put on ground as quickly as possible. We'll pursue all the necessary avenues to see how we can expedite action in getting this boundary put on ground. At some point, the members of the House thought they could perhaps prevail on some of the very major companies operating along the axis to see if they could support, but that has not come to fruition. But then, I know with the commitment of the two states, because as Edo State is worried, so is Kogi State, that this boundary be properly defined and demarcated as quickly as possible. We'll interface with Kogi State as well to get their buy-in and promise, and to also see how the people affected along the boundary line can be properly sensitized for work to resume as quickly as possible. Your Excellency, with regard to your boundary with your sister state Edo, there had been issues around the operations of Presco Company that have been reported on separately. And at some point, we agreed that Presco was going to be asked to perhaps refrain from activities that are within the area that are still under contest. And also the people that are to be adversely affected by the operations, either way, can be properly taken care of so that they will not have to suffer unnecessarily for activities of the Presco company. So, on that note, I want to recommend that the two states should please do whatever they can to ensure the maintenance of peace in the affected areas, and to also cooperate with National Boundary Commission to enable the speedy completion of work, including the demarcation of the consensus areas. It's on that note that I want to thank Your Excellency for being so passionate and so caring about this issue, because I know how you have been on top of the situation in putting mounting pressure that National Boundary Commission should not rest until this issue is resolved. Thank you very much, and God bless. Now, when Edo and Delta states were separated along the provinces that existed, and of course, we were already in terms of local government areas, old Bender State. And some of the local government areas now went to Delta, some remained in Edo. But you agree with me that even when you were together in the old Bender State, before you were separated, the boundaries between the local governments that constituted the then Bender were not quite clear because they are not defined. So when they say local government, for instance, if you say you're now creating a state, and you say, okay, one local government of Edo, currently, for instance, you say Esako and its neighboring district are separated. And then the issue will now become where exactly is boundary. As it is now, even as you are in Edo State, the local government boundaries between the various local governments that make up Edo State are not quite clear. And that was how they were when you were in the old Bender State before they were separated. So now they became aggravated because they are now two states. But in the same state, you can manage, okay, we're in the same state. But as soon as we now say, okay, Esako is in another state, and the neighboring local government is in another state. And the issue of where exactly is the boundary will come up. And of course, you have that problem nationally, because it is now, the boundary is not clear, even in the current Edo state. So, and that was how it was in Delta state when, so the divisions were not described. There may be maps, and the maps, we always said, maps are not quite exhaustive in terms of definition of the boundary. Because maps are supposed to be based on legal notice descriptions. So if you just see a map and it's not backed with a document describing how the lines shown on the maps are, you cannot, because you can't scale out something from the map and say they are exact. It's something you scale out, may put you about some miles, meters away from where it should be. That's why the descriptions are quite key. There may be the provinces have descriptions that are not quite clear. They may reference to features that cannot be found. But for divisions, there were hardly descriptions of these divisions. For instance, when Asaba division was moved out, where exactly is the boundary of Asaba division? So the documents describing it were not quite clear, and they were not even there. So those are some of the challenges. The maps that people draw, and I'm sure if you test the map you have as the administrative map of Edo State, by the time you want to start to get what you can scale out as the boundary between the local governments, you'll find that you run into a lot of problems. So, map of Nigeria is an aggregation of the maps produced by the various states that are matched together. And that's why when you have the interstate boundaries, they have overlap. Either one state claiming here or there. But we're going to make sure we go through all the necessary documents and come up with boundary lines in accordance with our act that says we should define these boundaries in accordance with available documents. When documents are not available, we'll make recommendations. But when documents are available, we'll try as much as possible to use them. And like the surveyors know, some of these documents are not quite clear. And that has been the problem, but we'll find a way out around them. And with the assured cooperation by the government of Edo, and I'm sure Delta will also pledge the same cooperation, we'll see how we can meander around and get the boundary sorted out as quick as possible. As for the timeline which His Excellency will have wanted us to say, it borders on so many factors. One, the resources, the budget provision. As it is now, we've not been able to do much for the year 2025 because of the way the budget is running. So we can't really make commitment, but at least we will do it as quick as possible. That I want to assure you. Thank you very much. We have come to the end of submission and receipt of documents. We want to believe that all the documents so far submitted are exhaustive, and that is all. And based on that, we will now start to take action. So when we get to Delta tomorrow, we press on them and look, we've not been able to bring documents to substantiate this, so as it is now, we'll just go with what we have. And because we can't, just like it was mentioned, we can't allow a party to delay the process effectively. There must be an end to this. So we'll come to an extent whereby we will personally perhaps interface with the two sides on individual basis where we need clarity or clarification, but we will do that as quickly as possible to make sure that this issue is resolved once and for all. Well, our act says define these boundaries in accordance with available delimitation documents. Where the documents are available, we use them. Where they are not available, we use other methods, one of which is what we call the ground to paper strategy, whereby there are no documents, we go on ground who is where, and based on that, make a recommendation on the boundary and try to recommend that to the federal government for adoption. And it will now be
A Edo State Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice Professor Roland Otaru, wey lead the Edo land dispute team, play devil's advocate as im tok say Delta State failure to bring forward their own documents show say dem no get strong evidence to support their claims. E remind the meeting say when dem create Edo and Delta State for 1991, the military decree wey separate the two states already define their boundary clearly, say so confusion no suppose dey at all.
And I remember with nostalgia, I carried out the research in the archive in Idahosa, and I discovered that there is this 40-wood commission required, 1941, 1942, the boundary between Auchi and my community. Well, that is by the way. Or the question I want to ask or pose is, when the former Midwest was created in August 1964, exercising Midwestern region from the Old West, I am sure that there was a boundary that was delineated and established and marked. Then, when Bede State was created in 1976, I'm also sure that there was this boundary between Bede State and all the states, surrounding the Bede State. Then eventually, when Delta State was created from the then Bede State in 1991, the two states, that is to say, Edo State and Delta State, and having regard to the Nigerian map, one would have expected that the National Boundary Commission, having regard to the decree, thereafter the act, establishing that very, very important body, that there ought to have been a demarcation when the two states were created from each other. Then, again, why this problem of incessant boundary disputes? Can the Boundary Commission, can it not delineate the boundary between Edo and Delta when Delta State was created in 1991? The same thing goes. The boundary between Kogi State and Edo State. Are there no marks or the delineation of the boundary between the two states? Or again, even between Ondo and Edo State. And there are features that are normally used in delineating the boundary between states, between communities, and especially rivers. Rivers, or maybe hills, because that was what Spottywood. He was the one that was sent by the resident district commissioner there, as it was then known, to come and investigate. And there was a recent decision of the Supreme Court between Jatu and Auchi and South Idi. I am privy to that. I've read that judgment. It was decided about a few years ago. So, Honorable Mr. Chairman, I think the National Boundary Commission, having regard to your functions as provided in the Act, one would have expected that, well, having regard to the Nigerian map, such boundaries, it shouldn't have been a problem. So I think we have to go back to the drawing board, having regard to the Nigerian map, the map of each state of the Federation, for easy delineation and identification of the respective boundaries between states, especially states that have a consanguinity, I will use that language, advancedly though, and even the boundaries between the internal communities within a state.
Other members of the committee also make contribution, including the representative of the Oba of Benin, Frank Irabo, who speak on behalf of the Benin monarch, Oba Eware II.
The Director General, National Boundary Commission. I want to make a few comments as regards your presentation, sir. You said that the National Boundary Commission requested Edo and Delta to provide documents with respect to River Etio as to the boundary in that axis. I think Edo has since submitted their own document because we are relying on that legal notice in that axis. So, and that river started from the source at Umuaja and then up to River Iyakiya, the tributary of River Iyakiya. And then coming to the issue of Okioba Forest Reserve. Sir, I believe that the time Edo State was in the provincial era, Edo State has, Benin Province has 4 divisions. Asaba, Benin Division, Ishan Division, and Kukuruku Division. Now, during the course of creating Edo and Delta State, using Decree 37 of 1991, we were told that the whole of Asaba Division was moved wholly, not in part. And this Asaba Division has a divisional boundary with Ishan Division. And this divisional boundary, the intact is in the map. And I think that mainly digitizing this boundary, this divisional boundary, will give us the boundary that will now become the interstate boundary in that axis. So then looking at the issue of Grokodo, because you mentioned Grokodo, yes, legal notice of 185 of 1926 did not use Grokodo as a boundary, sir. He only referred to Grokodo as a description in that particular area because the legal notice says that the boundary follows that river, which is Osiomo River, and then down to Bene River. So it mentioned river all through, and this river is visible on the ground. So Grokodo was only mentioned in the legal notice, or rather the gazette that has already been repealed. That gazette has been repealed. And Delta is hiding under the repealed gazette to now be talking about the issue of Grokodo, which is now the present legal notice that is subsisting. So I want to beg that National Boundary Commission should muzzle up the wheel to decide this boundary because all the court documents are there.
Relying on the parties to submit documents before you can take decision, I don't think that will actually expedite the action that needed to be taken. Look at it now. Delta State is delaying. They are delaying. And how are we sure? By asking one of the parties to submit documents that they will actually submit the genuine documents. They will definitely submit what will favor them. So it is better that the commission on its own carry out your own research, your own investigation. The documents are there. We all relied on government source when we are looking for all these documents. And the commission knows how to go about it. So I think we should try that way, sir.
As the meeting end, e clear say Edo State no dey ready for delay again as the state dey push for quick, correct and evidence-based resolution. With the National Boundary Commission set to enter the next stage and Edo legal and traditional institutions standing strong behind the state's position, attention now don turn to the federal government to give a fair and final decision. Make una no forget say, as we see am, na so we dey talk am. We no dey take blame. Ekata Ojisole, TMC News.